How you doing? Today we're going to be talking about when black men snap. All right. This dialogue or this idea for a audio blog came about. I was driving and I was listening to the Confessions of Nat Turner on YouTube, and it just got me thinking and taking a mental jog or just putting myself into the scenario settings environment that he was in. You know, when you listen to something, when you listen to a story and things like that and different narratives, you can kind of, your imagination puts you in a certain place. And this got me thinking about, you know, what brought him to that point. Because, Nat Turner used to be a conformed slave where he worked with the slave master to spread Christianity to keep slaves in line. And eventually he snapped, and we know that he went on his killing spree and how he got more slaves to go with him. And, we know the whole story behind that Turner. But then I was thinking about how has that manifested from then up to, um, 2020. We're in the 21st century, and black men are still snapping. And it even goes beyond Nat Turner. You think about Cinque from the Amistad. I was talking to one of my homegirls about this idea of black men and when they snap. And she brought up the Joseph Cinque and how he decided that the value of his life is worth more than being subjugated as a slave and being dehumanized in the system of chattel slavery. And it was worth it to snap and risk it all and go for broke and destroy uh, the slave catchers and well, the yeah, you might say slave catchers. They were just on a boat, um, and basically going on his spree, and killing those that were on there. But it's also, it's not just Nat Turner. It's not just Joseph Cinque. It's, you know, when you think of an individual snapping, it's kind of like, for America, America's not really used to seeing black men snapping too much. America is used to a long, extensive uh, litany. The annals of history are replete with young white males that snap. They go on their killing sprees. It's scores of young white male mass murderers and serial killers. Like I said, the annals of history are replete with that. Um, but you rarely see um, documentation of black men like snapping and going out and unleashing this inner rage onto society. And I'm not talking about what we would see with gang warfare, like where it's, oh, well, there's previous beef, and so I'm retaliating against this person, or, this gang is my opposing gang. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about individuals that, under certain circumstances, settings, scenarios, environments, and factors over a protracted period of time, arrive at a conclusion that today will be the day that I am going to unleash this inner rage that's been stewing and boiling inside of me, And I'm going to exact this rage on society or the individuals that I feel are harming me, oppressing me, enslaving me, are obstacles to my liberty, freedom, and humanity. That discussion is typically not had, and these type of events are not traditionally seen with black males in America. Now, when you look at the photo that I have for this audio blog, you see these 10 men. And what's interesting also is the fact that about 5 of them are ex-military, or were in the military. You got Christopher Dorner, who was in the military, and he's the one that got into the shootout with LAPD. He said he was going to wage asymmetrical warfare against the LAPD for mistreatment. He acknowledged the racism and unfair practices within the LAPD, and also how he was denied upward mobility and promotions in the department. You had Micah Johnson, who was the young black male in Texas that got into a shootout with the Texas police. He was ex-military. He was military. You had John Allen Muhammad, who was ultimately, he was trying to target his wife to kill her. But what he did was he started targeting innocent citizens, so that when he ultimately would kill his wife, she would just look like another victim of some random serial killer sniper. But he was ex-military. You had the DC Navy Yard, the Washington Navy Yard shooter, Aaron Alexis. This is the gentleman with the bald head. He had top level clearance working in DC Navy intelligence. He was also hired, and basically he was cleared and received the clearance that Edward Snowden, the same company that gave Edward Snowden top security clearance. And he ended up bringing a 12-gauge shotgun to his workplace and shooting and killing people. And he said that he was, they say he was probably battling mental health. Said he was hearing voices, saying that he was being targeted with extra low frequency messages, a lot of different things. Who else was on there that was, so that was Aaron Alexis, that was Christopher Dorner, Micah Johnson, John Muhammad. I think those 4 were military, ex-military. And so that speaks to one thing when we talk about black men and their enrollment in the United States military. And then we talk about them snapping. In this case, in these 10 case studies that I put up here as pictures, they make up 40% of the men in the picture, these ex-military black men. But see, then when you look at history, you have black men, and I was having a conversation with my homegirl about it. We had black men that went overseas to fight wars, trained and authorized to kill people that the United States had deemed enemies to the United States. So under the phrase of patriotism and loyalty and military honor, they would, just as soldiers do, you go to war, and wherever there's an enemy target, you eliminate it. So you have black men that were going overseas killing in various wars, um, as many enemies as they can, and then they come, in the name of freeing other people in other countries, in the name of liberty for other people in other countries, um, in the name of humanity for people in other countries, but then come back to America only to experience racism, inhumane treatment, unfair, unjust laws and treatment. There is a great PDF that you should read. Uh, if you go to www.eji.org, eji.org, that's Equal Justice Initiative. You could type in what's called Targeting Black Veterans, lynching in America. Targeting black veterans, lynching in America. And it goes over all of these different specifically targeted acts of violence, humiliation, lynching, and killings of black men from the 19th century all the way up into the 20th century. But they weren't just black men, these were black male soldiers. So there's detailing all of these soldiers from the Civil War, World War One, World War Two, that even though they go and fight on behalf of the country, they are then disregarded, disrespected, not given their proper honors, not given their proper promotions. A lot of them, once they came back, they took their guns away from these black officers. They didn't do that to white officers. Even in different cities, these black men would try and use the military to get their houses, and they were denied that, meaning were lynched. Okay? And so you have these black men that are trained to kill and have killed multiple people in the name of fairness, justice, and equality, only come back home and say, you know what? I am the targeted enemy. Whereas when we were dealing with targeted enemies overseas, I had to kill them, but I'm the targeted enemy here, and nobody's here to protect and defend me. There has to be some type of mental psychosis that starts to develop there, especially knowing that you've actually killed, you've taken people off the earth. You've actually killed in the name of justice, only to not receive justice at home from the same people that you've killed for, right? So I look at that, and then, like I said, I look at Micah Johnson, I look at your Christopher Dorner, I look at that Aaron Alexis, you look at John Muhammad. What's going on in these guys' heads? What's going on in their mind? Now, you look at Colin Ferguson. This gentleman was a black man that got on the Long Island Railroad in New York. You know, Long Island Railroad, this is where it's a mode of transportation that take you from the deep, deep suburbs of Long Island all the way into Times Square and Penn Station, New York City, and Manhattan, right? This is an extensive commute from various parts of Long Island, but it was probably one of the best ways for suburbanites to come into the city to work during the daytime. And thus you have like a lot of white passengers, because a lot of whites, the deeper into Long Island that you go, it's mostly populated with white citizens. It's reported that Ferguson was extremely discontent, angered by the bouts of racism that he's experienced. I believe also job loss or inability to find employment, and just various cases of discrimination and racism he felt. And he got on the Long Island Railroad with a 9mm, and while the train is moving, there's nowhere to go. You know, you just imagine being in a train car, and discriminately starts firing, shooting and killing white passengers. And so, he's he's subdued by passengers and arrested. He's doing time. He snapped. You had your Micah Johnson, who was the ex-military, that also was talking about the unfairness and inequality. This is what he said, that he was sick and tired of the injustice, the inequality, and police abuse that he's seeing in America as an American soldier. And this is before he went out and committed these acts in Texas, right? Aaron Alexis, the Navy Yard shooter, not only was it just a mental health thing, he also talked about dealing with bouts of racism and discrimination in his employment area. All right. Now, you also have, you had, what is his name? We did. Larry Davis was a very interesting case. This is an individual from the Bronx. This is in the early 90s in New York City, who it's alleged and said that, he used to rob drug dealers. It's alleged that he's killed drug dealers and, taken their money. It's alleged that he's worked with the police. The police have used him to do different dirty deeds for these dirty cops. And one day these cops were coming to pretty much double cross him and try to come and do a raid on his apartment. And they did not know what they were getting into. As they tried to raid his apartment, he was armed, and he gave them an extremely difficult shootout for them to manage. He shot multiple officers, critically wounding them, and was able to escape. You had a citywide manhunt launched, looking for him. I think you had Mayor Ed Koch talking about him. This was, it was something else. What was interesting was you had portions of the city where you had black people actually looking at Larry Davis as a hero for many. They feel that due to the extreme levels of police brutality and exploitation of the badge, abusive badge, that this was a win for the citizens. That was a sentiment in a lot of people expressed on videotape. Eventually, he negotiated his own surrender to the feds and ended up in jail, incarcerated, and eventually he was killed by another inmate later on. But this was his whole thing was his Larry Davis whole thing was the exploitative use of the police badge and how they're using their privilege to engage citizens of New York, and whether he was in cahoots with them or not, that's what his story was, and that he wasn't going to let them come into the apartment and kill him and his family. That's what he said. That's on tape. If you look at that, there was a Troy Reed documentary that is very interesting that you should take a look at. This is not my words. This is what Larry Davis said. So that's Larry Davis. That's Aaron Alexis. You have Brian Nichols. Now, this is the gentleman with the T-shirt on and the low-cut, brown-skinned gentleman that he was in an Atlanta courtroom that while he was being sentenced and read his rights, he ended up grabbing a court officer's gun, shooting the officer, shooting and killing the judge, and escaping the courtroom, getting into a car and speeding away and escaping, and then hiding out. Eventually, I can't remember if the lady he was with convinced him to turn himself in or what, but he was staying at a lady's house and eventually brought in by the police. But something going on there. That's something that's never really been seen before, for somebody to do that, and for a black male to do that, to take a court officer's gun and shoot the officer, shoot the judge, and kill the judge, escape out of, that's something. So that's Brian Nichols. Now you have the other gentleman that, like, he sustained a wound to the eye and the ear. That is Robert Williams of the Bronx. This is a gentleman who recently, this year, I believe he's 43 probably. He had shot, it's alleged he shot two policemen in a police van, and then I think another day he went into the police precinct and shot the police precinct. And it said that he had developed a lot of disdain for law enforcement for what they've just been doing. Also said that he's been suffering from mental health because his son was accidentally killed by the discharge of a firearm. He had also served, I think, like 13 years in jail. And after his son died, when he got out, it was recently after he got out that his son had passed away from the shooting. And all of that kind of spiraled into this snowball of events. He started taking hallucinogenic drugs, his mother says. Combine that, I guess, with the feeling of animosity that he had, developing animosity he had with law enforcement, and he snapped, so you have that. So that is Robert Williams, that is Aaron Alexis, that's Christopher Dorner, Brian Nichols, Colin Ferguson. We know Nat Turner, who was in the system of slavery, that decided to rebel against his slave owner. And you had Joseph Cinque, who was on the Amistad, that, if you ever seen the movie Amistad, then you already know where the picture comes from that's inside of the picture shown for this video. That put it all on the line for himself. So you have these various instances in which black men have this compelling inner rage that boils, brews, and eventually bubbles over into something that beyond a place in which the black man is considered passive in society. That he decides that, I'm going to take all matters into my hands, whether right or wrong, just or unjust, moral or unethical. I'm going to do what I feel to remove this burden of injustice, unfairness, or anything that may be that I'm just tired of. And I'm going to get rid of it, whether it is law enforcement, or whether it is social construct. It's something to really think about. Like I said, we're used to seeing scores of white males as serial killers and mass murderers. They've snapped. But you don't really see too many episodes of black. I'm not, like I said, I'm not talking about gang warfare, but you don't really see too much or too many episodes of black men um, snapping like this. And when it happens, it's you have to look at it and really examine it with a full circumspect view. And I think it would be wise for America in itself to look at it because you have a lot of a lot of black military veterans. You have a lot of poor, indigent black males. And so, what does this mean for American society when you have rising high rent? So, we're looking at the factors now that might be contributing. You have rent in New York City that's almost at $3,000 for a single bedroom. In LA, you have homelessness beyond you can ever imagine. In Los Angeles, the homelessness rate is ridiculous. You have the process of gentrification happening in all major cities where, especially that are highly populated with black citizens, whether we're talking Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, New York, Philly, LA, Miami, different cities in Texas, all over. You have gentrification happening. You have long-term black city inhabitants being pushed out, and then you look at the fact that wages are stagnant. They are calcified, they're solidified, and hourly wages and salary are not increasing. They are stagnant, yet the cost of living is steadily increasing in all major sectors and all major measures, whether we're talking about the cost of daycare, whether we're talking about rent, whether we're talking about taxes, whether we're talking about the cost of food, whether we're talking about the cost of medical care, the cost of transportation, the cost of education. Everything is constantly increasing, but you don't have an increase in wages and salary. You have law enforcement that are abusing their badge and exploiting their badge, privileges of their badge. Not all of them, of course, but you do have a serious problem that's been documented by the FBI and Internal Affairs, that you do have officers that are engaging in abusing their oath of office as a servant of the public. There's a problem with that. So you have basically you have poor people that are getting poorer, being abused by supposed to be servants of the city and the country. You have the cost of living that's constantly rising and no relief in sight. And then you have people getting laid off of their jobs, getting fired, getting cut. You have the outsourcing of jobs overseas, and then you also have the firing of human labor with the replacement of robotics, automation, and software. So the question is, what do you think is going to happen? Maybe there will be more black men that possibly snap.